Hello, you're listening to the Drawing the Ideal Self podcast, episode 62. Today we're going to look at a little section from a book called The Child Within by Butler and Green, and the section's called Children Behave in Particular Ways Because It Makes Sense to Them. In personal construct psychology, the processes used by children are exactly the same as those used by adults, and I think this section would be useful to anybody working with people. So this is from the second edition of Butler and Green, and the book is called The Child Within, Taking the Young Person's Perspective by Applying Personal Construct Psychology. I'll put the reference in the show notes so that you can have a look at it. If you work with children and young people, this is one of the key texts for personal construct psychology. So anybody who's working with children and young people will find that adults are the referrers. It's very rare that a young person will refer themselves for any help. And adults are referring because they experience a sense of invalidation. They either don't understand what the child is doing, or what they think the child is doing is unbearable to them. So it makes them feel that they're not a good teacher or not a good parent. And one of the things that is common in referrals for children is when people feel that the child is behaving in ways that make absolutely no sense. It's not in the child's interests, from the adult's point of view, to be doing the things that they're doing because they keep on getting into trouble. That trouble could be trouble with learning, it could be trouble with behaviour. So they might approach tasks or situations repeatedly in ways that lead to problems. That could be something like not looking at the work that they've got to use to work out what to do, not reading something. It could be rushing out onto the playground or being always late in the lineup for coming back into class. It could be walking into places where it is known that there are kids who seem to see that as their area and therefore bully everyone who comes in. These kind of behaviours are often confusing to us, and we want to understand what it is that is leading to the child doing this again. They've tried it once, doesn't work well. Why do people keep doing the same things? Now, from a Kellyan point of view, that applies to every single one of us. We all behave in ways which don't make sense to other people, and also sometimes don't make sense to ourselves. You can have that moment of, oh my goodness, why did I do that again? I should have known better. The reason that we don't is because it makes more sense to carry on as we've done before than it does to change. And change, remember, is very difficult to do. I'm going to read this whole section because I think it's a really nice summary. Children behave in particular ways because it makes sense to them. The actions of others often appear bemusing. Youngsters may act in ways that stir discord, opposition, or contention in others, appear fully absorbed in unusual or idiosyncratic behaviours, or display considerable unease in situations others may find exciting, engaging, or commonplace. We tend to understand others through interpreting their behaviour and actions in our terms. Thus, should our moral construing take precedent when we see a group of young people vandalising property, we may take the view that they are being antisocial. However, acts and behaviour begin to make sense once we seek to construe the world in their terms. For these youths, their high spirits in destroying property might be construed as sociable in that it maintains their status in the group or helps to curry favour with peers. Although not always immediately apparent, all actions serve a useful purpose for the actor. This principle emerges as a logical and related extension of the thesis that a child's behaviour reflects the way they construe. The notion that a child's behaviour makes sense to the individual, no matter how bizarre, deviant, or self-defeating it may appear to the onlooker, is a pivotal theme arising from personal construct theory. Don Bannister's seminal work with individuals incarcerated on the long-stay wards of psychiatric institutions who were diagnosed as suffering with schizophrenia was perhaps the ultimate expression of this core assumption of the theory. Bannister 1962-3. Bannister sought to discover the personal sense in the construing of individuals deemed to be displaying classic thought disorder. He endeavoured to make an understandable link between their views of the world and their often seemingly bizarre behaviour. As a result of Bannister's investigations, he surmised that these patients employed such loose systems for understanding their social worlds that they could not reliably anticipate events. In consequence, their own actions seemed unpredictable and senseless to those around them. In returning to the arena of childhood, it is precisely those children who most frustrate our efforts to help that we need to make the most conscious effort to understand. Otherwise, we are tempted to give up and justify our ineffectiveness by resorting to hopeless explanations of human behaviour that locate responsibility firmly within the child, such as plain evil, lazy, thick as two short planks, and so on. However, gaining convincing access to a youngster's private perspective is far easier said than done, especially when children rarely have the awareness to deliver their understandings like the morning newspaper on the doormat, even if they had the inclination. Nonetheless, implicit in personal construct theory is the faith that the child's behaviour is valid, that it represents a search for meaning, and there is always a potentially comprehensible relationship between an individual's actions and their constructions of the world. Although a pretty sizable task, making sense of a child's conduct would be enhanced if it were possible to see the world through their eyes. In such a vein, PCT encourages us to metaphorically put ourselves in the youngster's shoes. From such a vantage point, we may perceive how things are from their perspective. The process of understanding someone else therefore calls for us to suspend our usual ways of construing. Once another's behaviour becomes understood in their terms, light is often shed on the reasons they may be stuck. Behaviour which appears problematic can be understood sometimes as a solution for the individual, an idea elaborated by Tom Ravenette in the educational setting. From a more clinical setting, bedwetting may be maintained because, as one child suggested, it ensures that the smell will prevent burglars from breaking into the flat. Because behaviour makes sense to the protagonist, it is always useful to ask for what problem the behaviour is a solution. A preparedness to investigate the motives behind even the most deviant and dangerous activities of young people is not an intention to excuse. On the contrary, if public policy towards juvenile delinquency, for example, is not informed by proper scientific curiosity about the inner world of those who misbehave, it is unlikely to meet its stated aims. As surely as correct diagnosis needs to precede effective medical treatment, so an understanding of each individual child's experience should precede psychological intervention in their life. There is nothing inherently wrong with labels. We need to categorise and make discriminations. Problems arise if the adhesive on our labels gets too sticky by half. What begin as useful propositions may end as unalterable opinions, as we slowly succumb to what Kelly described as the dread condition of hardening of the categories. What we need is the psychological equivalent of those clever little yellow notelets that can be stuck on most surfaces to convey some helpful message, but are easily removed once they have fulfilled their purpose. The alternative may mean caging children for infinity in the pigeonholes we have constructed for them. So what we're interested in as personal construct therapists is what people are doing, why they're doing it, and where it moves them to, what they get from it, in their terms, not in ours. It's very easy to read many books on child behaviour and have all kinds of assumptions about what people are actually up to and what might work to help that behaviour to change. But actually, unless we involve the young person, however young they are, we're not going to understand the world from their point of view. And therefore, even if we used a standard intervention that's been proved every time to work, those reports are based on the average of people. We might have the person who's an outlier, who it doesn't work at all for. So I would emphasise the need to really understand a person's point of view before we try to think of what might help them. Okay, so that was a short and sweet episode, but I think it's a very nice summary that will help us to think about, okay, what is it that we're up to when people complain, particularly about children's behaviour. But referrers complain about everybody's behaviour. Someone's crying too much because they're depressed. Somebody's too anxious to go out of the house, and they should go because they're no longer going to work, and we want them to go to work as a society. There's always a reason that the referrer has for making the decision to make a referral. So whatever age the people you work with, that's going to be relevant. And I would look hard at that and ask the person what they think about that referral. Is that the way they see things? Are they, for instance, getting in too many fights? Or from their point of view, they're getting in about the right amount of fights. That's keeping people away, it's stopping them getting bullied. It's meaning that they can walk home safely because they are known to be a fighter if necessary. Don't make the assumption that you know based on other people's views. Make sure that you find out for yourself from the person that you're working with. If you're a regular listener to this podcast, it'd be really helpful to me to know what you do, what kind of environment you work in, because I have none of that information. I don't know that about the people on my mailing list either, because I don't collect that data. I often wonder about whether the podcast is useful to people, whether it's worth listening to from your point of view, whether it helps you to understand personal construct psychology a bit better. Because I don't like collecting data about people, the only thing I know is the kind of age groups of people, if they've put their age on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anything like that. I don't know anything else. I can see how many plays an episode has had. I can see how many followers there are on Spotify. But what I don't know is if it's doing something useful for people. As far as podcasts go, it apparently is one of the higher performers because although it's not out very often, it's only once a month, it's consistent, which is unusual. And most podcasts don't last any longer than a few episodes. And not many last more than 3 years. I don't have any company working with me to do this. I do it on my own computer. So I don't have the benefit of them thinking, we need to find all this out. And there are no adverts because I don't like that. If you are listening on a format which actually has adverts in, please don't think I've done that because I find it really irritating when there's an ad in the middle of a programme. I know YouTube will do that regardless of anything I do now, and I'm guessing other podcast providers might too. So, if you wouldn't mind sending me an email to drawingtheidealself@icloud.com, I'd be really grateful. If all you tell me is, yes, it's worthwhile, I'm going to take that at face value and I'll carry on doing it. If you say, it would be great to have a bit more on this or that, I'll take that into account where I can. I can't always, but I will if I can. I know that most people won't send anything. So if you're somebody who thinks, I might do that, please remember to do it because it would be great if I could get a bit of feedback. Okay, thank you very much indeed for listening and I will see you again next month.